Hello. Thank you for QED for inviting me and for making me feel at home, because we are in the Salon France. So I'm quite relaxed, as you can see. So I'm not representing any benchmark administrator. I'm a user. Amundi is a user of benchmarks, and that's so. I think I move to that to make the points. Plus. Thank you. That's and the other one down. Okay, it's going down. I thought it was always moving up. That's difficult. So a word about asset managers. We do not intend to be at Amundi to be benchmark administrators. That's what is on the last line, except for cost reasons. And I would like to thank Martina, because she did mention cost once about endorsement, and nobody else did mention cost as an issue. And it is for us as users the key question. Make sure that the benchmark regulation will not be taken as a pretext, an opportunity to increase costs, which have already increased quite a lot in the recent years. There is an issue on how long it will last to have prices moving up and moving up all day. But generally speaking, yes, we are very positive about BMR, benchmark regulation, because it clarifies the situation and gives us some visibility about the responsibility. There's one index and there's one administrator who is fully responsible for it. And that's a major movement. And asset managers we are very large users, as I say, and I put some words which are of importance and which are covered within the regulation. Yes, we replicate that the types of ETFs or indexed funds, for example. Put my thing. We calculate performance fees based on indices. Yes, that is taken care within the regulation. We determine final payment of structured bonds or structured funds, be they guaranteed or not. We combine indices on combination. There might be some need for further clarification at level 3, just to make sure that composite indices are covered, that's clear. Currency hedge is covered in our view, that's clear. Carve-out should be covered as well, as being part of a combination of indices. And most importantly, as I mentioned at the first point, we pay fees. There is one specific case I would like to stress, which is the position of AMF in France. France is probably one of the countries where there are the highest number of funds referencing indices. And we do reference indices because for decades, AMF and before it, COB, did ask us, asset managers, to give proper information, to bring proper information to investors, and a reference to an index was quite an easy way to bring proper information that will enlighten them and be able to understand at one site the level of expected return and the level of potential risk. So we do refer to benchmarks in many different types of funds, even if we do not run index funds. And in that case, we go even take the reference of the benchmark, which has been imposed to us as risk management instrument. And we make sure not to diverge too much, even if we are not benchmarked. So that's something to discuss with our national competent authority. Nevertheless, it's important to mention it because we are very much concerned, and maybe that's why, as a French asset manager, I've been invited today, because we are probably more concerned than others. The following point, so that's a general introduction. Now, to make a few points, I have three more slides. scope of benchmarks and made available to the public. I am not so satisfied with the definition of made available to the public within the regulation. Why? Because we want, as asset managers, to be able to carry on with using indices to run funds which are dedicated to a limited number of investors. And that is common practice, and we do not want these funds to have to refer to benchmarks which are under the benchmark regulation. They are bespoke indices to serve clients' needs, and they are kept confidential. Yes, there is a possibility to sign NDAs all through the line, the chain of users, but there could be some other way to address this issue in our view. And the potentially indeterminate number concept is potentially too large, too extensive, and is probably not clear enough to bring legal certainty in our view. Discussing about administering the arrangements, in that field, we feel we as asset managers may be involved into the definition of the methodology, especially when we discuss with the client, the asset manager, the index producer and administrator. We all discuss together at the very beginning, for example, before mandate being given. We do not want that, the fact that we participate to the definition of the methodology together with the client and the administrator to lead to the fact that we would be considered as an administrator. No, that's not what we want to, even if in some cases we do not want the administrator to say, I have the property right, because we discussed it at the very beginning together, but I'm running the show. Yes, the administrator is running the show, is conducting all the production, and is monitoring and overseeing the production and diffusion of the index. But nevertheless, he shouldn't be entitled in all cases to have all the property rights. We want to keep it. Sometimes we may. Third country indices. Just to point out that we use some third country indices, and some of them are produced by entities which do not produce many indices and which may just not feel like to come to the European authority and make sure that they are registered as administrator. For us, it is a question, because there are places not on frontier markets, but on developing markets, for example, where local exchanges produce benchmarks which are, in our view, much closer to what the economic reality we want to follow. A word, because that's the key question for the asset managers, a word about the inconsistency between benchmark regulation and the ESMA guidelines that apply to UCITS. These guidelines demand that asset managers conduct very thorough investigation and diligences on on index providers, index administrators, before using them in UCITS. That's fine. The point is that we have to check things on the index on one side and on the administrator on the other side. We do rely on declarations for quite a lot of the items we have to check. When we speak about the way the administrator is organized and proceeds with difficulties on information, or the question about the methodology for changes, we get answers which are declaration and declarative form by the asset manager, by the administrator, benchmark administrator. The administrator is regulated by BMR. We still expect and hope that the regulators will take into consideration the fact that for those diligences which are a burden for asset managers to be conducted on in these index providers, the regulation BMR should include the similar requirements to make sure that they will comply with the guidelines. Regulators have leverage about regulated entities. Asset managers are not regulators. We have no leverage, and we have to rely on declaration made by administrators, which doesn't help in terms of transparency. So that's why I suggest that the administrators will have to go a little bit further to make sure that we get access to the constituents and the weightings of the benchmarks, which is a requirement under the guidelines, and which is something where both IOSCO principles and the BMR in Europe have decided not to go that far because of property rights. So there is something inconsistent there also, and I suggest that the ESMA guidelines be revisited. And the last point, I will probably just go very, very quickly because it was already discussed. So, with reference to the criticality threshold or significance threshold for funds, the fallback. So we do totally agree with what has been decided on the fact that we refer to the UCITS or the AIFMD reports. There is a standard source there. In the fallback system, I do not like the mention of non-reputability or non-reliability provision. I think it is not necessary to mention that, and that it may simply make things more difficult to understand. Issuance of financial instruments, just to say that we've, as mentioned, yes, we feel that funds are already covered by the usage of benchmark and should not be again if they are listed as issuers, because we do not issue like bonds or are issued or so. Transitional measures, there is definitely, and that was underlined, a gap between 2018 and 2020, and that has to be should be addressed as well. Thank you.